If you hate J.D. Vance as much as I do, you're going to love this video, because Donald Trump just ended J.D. Vance's 2028 presidential campaign before it could even begin. And he did it publicly in the most humiliating way possible. Not only did he throw J.D. Vance under the bus, he also triggered a conflict within his own administration that will weigh on his White House for the rest of his term. Donald Trump has essentially sparked a civil war between himself, Vance, and Marco Rubio with a career-ending move that is now leaked to the public. But it starts with the seemingly small disagreements we're seeing between Donald Trump and J.D. Vance over Trump's illegal war against Iran. It began at the start of this conflict, at the beginning of this illegal war. That's where I want to begin, before we get to Donald Trump's public humiliation of J.D. Vance and what could be the end of his political career. Trump calls Vance's frantic explanations about the Iran war complete nonsense. Donald Trump has left his vice president out to dry and rejected the idea that J.D. Vance had to be persuaded before agreeing to yet another foreign war. In a clear rebuke of Vance's shifting public stance on the conflict, Trump dismissed the idea that the vice president, whose political reputation was built on opposing foreign intervention, had been conflicted about allowing the U.S. to carry out strikes over the weekend. In a brief interview with Real Clear Politics, Trump said Vance needed no convincing to support the attacks, which have already resulted in the deaths of 6 U.S. soldiers. Those remarks could be politically dangerous for Vance, who has positioned himself as the standard bearer of the anti-interventionist wing of the MAGA movement, as he tries to walk a tightrope in a war that could ultimately define and possibly damage his future. For example, in 2023, Vance wrote an opinion piece praising Trump's restraint when it came to starting wars, calling it a lasting legacy of his first term. So this was essentially Trump throwing Vance under the bus, a humiliation in his own way. And we talked about this as the beginning of the growing tension between Vance and the rest of the administration. Vance has obviously tried to present himself as someone opposed to the neoconservatives and against American intervention abroad until Donald Trump decided to do exactly that. And then Vance suddenly said, well, Donald Trump is a smart president. The man who couldn't even take his own SATs, who brags about being able to identify an elephant, and who is the dumbest person I've ever heard give or mumble through a speech. And that's the smart president. He once asked whether you could stop a hurricane with a nuclear bomb, JD. That's the genius. That's the person we're supposed to trust with the codes? I don't think so. But Donald Trump didn't stop there, because he was asked again about the distance between him and Vance. And he made sure JD couldn't escape it.
Points of disagreement between yourself and your vice president when it comes to U.S. action in Iran?
I don't think so, no. No, we get along very well on this. He was, I would say, philosophically a little bit different than me. I think he was maybe less enthusiastic about going, but he was quite enthusiastic. But I felt it was something we had to do. I didn't feel we had a choice. If we didn't do it, they would have done it to us. I felt, based on the negotiations that were being had by Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner and Marco and Pete, and everybody was involved, I felt that they were looking to tap us along before they hit, and I thought they were going to hit. And if they hit us first, that would have been a very bad thing.
So Donald Trump is really doing his best to drag Vance in as far as possible, get his hands dirty, and make it clear he supported this war. He went along with it. He was enthusiastic about it. Don't even try to claim otherwise. But J.D. Vance's public self-portrayal as someone who is clearly only thinking about himself and the 2028 election was very different. Because he knows, even though Republicans support this war because they're in a cult, it's only about 60% of them. And J.D. Vance cannot afford to lose the part of the Republican Party that supported his anti-interventionist stance early in his career. That's why when Vance talks about the war, he doesn't actually call it war.
In the dignified transfer of 6 American soldiers who were killed overseas in this conflict with Iran.
Wow. JD, now it's officially a conflict because Donald Trump calls it a war. He's renamed the War Department. He says he wants to track the war like it's a TV show. But you call it a conflict. A conflict. Completely different. Count me out. JD wants to distance himself from Trump. Trump wants to pull him back in. But really, Trump wants to push him away. He doesn't want Vance to inherit the legacy of his movement. And he made that very clear with a public humiliation of Vance and the end of his 2028 prospects. NBC News reports President Trump asked some of his top government officials and political donors whom they would prefer as president, J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio. According to 2 attendees, the room overwhelmingly cheered for Secretary of State Marco Rubio. It was almost unanimous for Marco, one attendee said. Trump has been asked this question more than once, and his answer has always been, well, honestly, I don't know. I don't know who I would pick. And why don't I just run for another term? Everyone loves me. That's what Trump always says. But then he goes to his donors, to his allies, and they say, Marco, you like Marco. You don't like JD. The political chameleon they see through just as clearly as we all do, because JD will throw them under the bus as soon as it suits him. But Trump just pulled the ladder out from under him. JD is falling into political death, because if the major donors who control the Republican Party don't rally behind him, and Trump's allies in his administration control the media apparatus, endorsements, and backroom maneuvering, J.D. Vance is left relying only on grassroots support. But when it comes to the issues that have split the base, first, there's Trump's exploding defense budget. Thomas Massie talks about it. Some Republicans insist on fiscal discipline and are unhappy with Trump's spending. Point 1. J.D. Vance, your hands are dirty there. Then the Epstein files. Donald Trump refuses to release them. Donald Trump is breaking the law. Trump, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel are protecting pedophiles. And finally, the issue that most contradicts what J.D. Vance built his career on. The war. No. Conflict. J.D. Donald Trump calls it a war, an illegal war, and he's getting your hands dirty again. So Trump isn't just making it hard for Vance to win support from the base, as polls show week after week, month after month, that support continues to shrink. And if you get the nomination, JD, you will lose in a landslide. Doesn't matter against Newsom, Pritzker, Ayok, Kamala Harris, or Andy Beshear. The list goes on. Wes Moore doesn't matter. After this administration, almost anyone would win over 300 electoral votes against Vance. But back to Marco Rubio, the ultimate flip-flopper in Washington, a man without a backbone. What has he always said about J.D. Vance, about his good friend? Rubio said, if J.D. Vance runs, I'll support him. But then he had that big moment at the State of the Union address where everyone applauded Marco, everyone loved Marco. And now, at this small Republican meeting, everyone cheers for Marco. So do we really believe Marco Rubio, the man without a backbone, who changes his mind on everything? Do we really think he stands with JD? Does he really want to be his vice president? Or does he see a chance and think, maybe I could win this nomination? Maybe I could pull it off. And what does this mean for Trump's administration? It means the fights have already begun. Camps are forming. Leaks are happening. Attacks on Vance, attacks on Rubio. And that's what Donald Trump has to deal with. Why pit the two against each other? Sure, because he wants them to dance for him. That's what Trump loves. There's no one he wouldn't humiliate. There's no one in his life he wouldn't publicly shame. Look at Lindsey Graham, the first pet of the United States. A little dog. And back to Rubio. The fights have begun because Donald Trump is igniting them. And I love it. I love that he's signaling to JD, you're not running. It's over. Look at everyone cheering your non-nomination. Everyone is Team Marco. But I also love that this fight has begun because it's a fight Donald Trump now has to manage. It only makes it harder for him to unite the party behind this endless, unnecessary, illegal war. And if you hate J.D. Vance, this isn't just ridiculously funny because it's a public humiliation. It's also just good news considering the fights we're going to see in this administration. It's delicious. Hopefully, we'll be back in the studio tomorrow. No more shooting in hotel rooms. I'm just in New York. For those who saw it, there was a great episode with my best friend Jennifer Welch that I wanted to briefly mention. But we're coming back to the studio to keep going. All of this needs to be addressed. If you want to support that, you can, as always, hit the subscribe button and leave a like on this video. If you made it all the way to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. I love you. You're the reason I get to do this. And it's the greatest pleasure of my life to take J.D. Vance down a peg. So keep fighting, everyone. Don't let them silence you. And until next time, we'll see you soon.